Hello, hello. Welcome to season 5 of Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser. My name is Debbie Heiser, and I help entrepreneurs make a lot of money doing what they love without sacrificing what's important to them. I see way too many business people letting their businesses or their jobs run their lives versus them figuring out with real clarity about what they want their lives to look like and having their job or their business be the conduit to have that life that they absolutely love. I want to thank you so much for listening in to season 5. This season is filled with motivation, inspiration, leadership, and wisdom from some super interesting guests, and myself included. My hope is through our shared experiences, you will see a bit of yourself and move further into leading your own lit up life. If you're enjoying this podcast, please feel free to share with others and leave a rating, and a comment or two would be awesome too. Let's get going. Thanks again for being a part of our community.
Straight from the corners of my mind is where I find my sanity.
Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser. I am honored and thrilled today to have my friend Sergio Lopez with us. And Sergio and I don't remember the year we met. It's funny because now I'm like pre-COVID and post-COVID. It's a pre-COVID relationship, meaning we have been colleagues now for quite a while. Through Gonzaga, Sergio got his degree at Gonzaga, master's. You didn't go back for your PhD there, right? It was just your master's?
Yeah, just my master's.
Right? Like just.
It's a lot of work for just.
Yes, it was. I catch myself. And we both got our masters at Gonzaga. And then we have done a lot of work, particularly with our mentor and friend, Dr. Jack Horseman or John Horseman. And that's really where we started to get to know each other a lot better and doing some of this work. Co-wrote an article that just came out this last month in a servant leadership handbook. So Sergio, you part of why I wanted to have you on an episode is because you I don't want to say reinvent, but you are constantly evolving, right? You're constantly growing. You just grew your family not too long ago. You live in California, you're doing this academic work, you're doing these other things. You're just showing up in the world in what I see as a lit up life. It doesn't mean life is always easy. It doesn't mean that there's not things and challenges. I know, I've seen some things on Facebook and social media recently, where there's some tough stuff, there's hard stuff, but you have this ability. I always see you as the grounded one, right? When we're working together, you're just centered and grounded. And so that's how I know Sergio. That's what inspires me about Sergio. And I want to get into a conversation with you about how you're leading your lit up life. But before we do that, if you would, thank you for being here and introduce yourself to the listeners and watchers on YouTube of what you do. How do you show up in service?
Yeah, thanks, Debbie. Yeah. My name is Sergio Lopez, and I'm based out of California, Southern California, native of Southern California. And right now I work as a senior trainer for leadership development at Catholic Relief Services, which is an international nonprofit that does humanitarian and development work in over 100 countries. And I mentioned to you just before we started the call that I think it was last month, we just, a couple of colleagues and I launched a small consultancy firm called the Center for Nonprofit Leaders, and we're also working to help leaders become better leaders for a better world. And so also happy to take my interests in leadership development and my passion for making the world a better place and bridging those two divides to help people become leaders and organizations that can serve the interests of humanity. And so, that's a little bit of what I do.
And Sergio, tell me what led you down. I mean, I know you do the leadership piece for what I call our W-2 jobs, right? But when you and your two colleagues looked at starting this, what need did you see out there that you felt like you could fulfill with this?
Yeah, well, I think especially for me, it's about making the world a little bit better, right, than the world that we received. And for me, this is the personal calling that is really rooted in my own story of my family. My family migrated to the United States from Mexico back in the late 70s, early 80s. And there's a phrase in Ubuntu African philosophy that says that I am because we are. And I am because of my family and the women that brought the women in our family who brought our family here to the United States to have a life where we could have opportunity and we can help to be a part of creating a world where everybody has the opportunity to live up to their full potential. And so, yeah, I'm just that passion for like making the world a better place comes from the opportunities that I was fortunate to receive because of that risk that the women in my family took to come to this country. And as a young man, I always just wanted to figure out what could I do, to make those opportunities available to people who maybe aren't as privileged to be able to, be born in this country, live in communities that are safe and that are thriving. So it comes from my upbringing, my family, and my interest in leadership really come from my experience of church kind of growing up. And it was at church where I first really started to see myself as a leader. I never thought of myself as a leader, but somebody at church said, hey, we want to send you to a week-long leadership camp. And I was like, me? And they paid like $300 for me to go to a leadership camp. And I remember coming back from that experience and I was so grateful. And I remember going to like the pastor in tears, like, it's $300 to a teenager seemed like, just a huge amount of money. And it was like, you put your faith in me. You gave me this amazing opportunity. And since then, I was just fascinated about leadership and what leaders do and who leaders are. And over time, ended up going back to school at Gonzaga, getting a second degree in organizational leadership because I'm passionate about helping to develop other leaders. And I really understand like that is the primary responsibility of leadership, is helping other people become leaders who can serve the world and serve humanity. So
I want to go back because there's a whole lot to unpack there, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to know more about your story in the respect, did you migrate here too were you a young person when you moved here or you weren't born yet? Like, tell me that. And then I want to know too, because you keep referring to the women, will you tell us a little bit more about that story?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I was born in the US. I was the first in my family to be born in the US. And then my sister followed about a year and a half afterwards. But I have two older brothers who were born in Mexico. My mom kind of started one family. Her husband died and she came to this country. But even before her was my great-grandmother, she was the one that really brought our family to the U.S. for the first time. And the story of how she came to the U.S. was that her husband, so this is my great-grandmother's husband, was kind of addicted to gambling. And that was like a lot of their marriage. And he was always like losing things that belonged to the family in different, we call it la baraja. He was playing cards. And at one point, like the last straw that prompted my great-grandmother to come to the U.S. was that he had bet her on a game of cards and he had lost. And the story goes that the person who had won the game of cards came to my great-grandmother's house to collect his debt.
Right.
And he's like, Doña Rufina, I'm here to take my prize. You're my prize. And that she came out with a rifle. And she's like, you're not taking me anywhere. I'm taking my kids. I'm finally leaving this man. I'm going to the U.S. And that was the story of how my great-grandmother came to this country. And I remember when I learned this story, I was just like, no way, like you can't write a story like that. And but she was tough. She grew up during the Mexican Revolution. And so she had experienced a lot. And finally got tired of it and said, you know what, I'm gonna take my kids where they don't have to worry about all these things. And so she brought our family here, and eventually my mom came into the U.S., met my dad, and so I was the first of kind of my mom's second family really to be born here. So I was the first to go to graduate high school, graduate college. I got my first master's degree in religious studies before I started working for CRS. And then when I went and started working with them, they gave me the opportunity to get that second degree in organizational leadership. And all of this wouldn't have been possible, had my great grandmother and then my grandmother and my mother, taken some risks and been the type of women, who could just take a step forward, trusting that it was going to be for the better. And so something I hope I can carry on from them.
Wow. I just think about the courage that took, right? And resiliency. So I want to back up and ask a little bit more personal question.
Yeah.
Did it tell me about, did it feel like pressure, proud, a combination of everything, being the first?
Yeah. It's a great question.
There's a lot to that, right?
Oh, so much. And I know it's not just people who've immigrated to this country, but I know even people in this country, a lot of times, like, they're the first in their family to do something. And I've been learning, it is very much a common, I think, experience when you are the first, that there's this like now expectation that like you're just going to keep ascending and keep growing and keep getting higher and higher in the org chart or the socioeconomic ladder, or whatever the case may be. And there's something beautiful about that, and helping want to support people to live out their full potential. And there's also something really challenging about at a very young age getting the message that like whatever you accomplish, it's not enough.
There's this universal law of polarity, right? Like that you can't have rich without poor. So you can't have like this idea of the gratefulness around that and the benefits and how it served you, right? To do the things that you've done, but also the pressure. And that living up to those expectations that comes with that too. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Oh yeah. I mean, to the point, like, like I remember we talked, the way we met was at Gonzaga and studying, organizational leadership there. And I remember the day when I got my degree in the mail. So this is now my second master's degree. I'm like the first in my family to do all this stuff. I get the degree in the mail. I take it out. I take a picture of it. I'm really excited. I put it on Instagram. Literally not 5 minutes later, I was like, what am I going to do now? I started researching PhD programs, and I was like, I couldn't even enjoy it for 5 minutes. And I was like, you talk about living a lit up life. Like, I think to myself, like, the me of a couple of years ago who had that feeling of emptiness at the end of such a big accomplishment, like, is that what living a lit up life is? Or is it more about enjoying, what's in front of you and like savoring it to the fullest? And I don't know, I think we're all kind of discovering and searching what does that mean for us to live a lit up life. But I'd like to think that the me of today is finding a lot of joy and meaning in just the small things, however much time they take, however big of accomplishments people may see them, that there's actually a lot to be enjoyed in some of the small things that we experience in life.
Yeah. And Sergio, like, as you say that, I think about this idea of how we're each on our own journey, right? And so for some people, the achievement continues to be the thing. Although, like, I have a slightly different perspective, similar to what you were saying, where sometimes that if I'm achieving because that's what brings me satisfaction, that's different than trying to achieve to be able to, ask me how I know, right? Like the achievement was when I felt love for my dad. So, right. Like, so, and my dad's a wonderful man, but feeling that like I need to achieve something else because of the pressure of feeling like I wasn't enough the way I was. And it's not a judgment on anyone else that's doing that. But to me, I look at too, this idea of having peace. Right. And when you have peace, and don't get me wrong, the law of polarity, you have chaos too, but like when you have peace and you know who you are, this idea of, even in Greenleaf's writings, and one of the characteristics of servant leadership about self-awareness, and enough about who you are to feel comfortable enough to then show up where you're not in judgment of other people, so that achievement thing doesn't continue to carry on, right? Like, I'm not judging you. Like, it's great that people have all these accolades, but like, I'm kind of like, who are you? And, it defines some of who you are. But to that point, to me, leading our lit up life is dependent on what each person defines as success. and I don't even really love the word success, because that in and of itself kind of leads towards an achievement piece of it, right? But like whatever we define, and for me, success is peace.
Mhm.
And leading a lit up life means I'm doing what I feel like is my more life directive. Like I know I'm a teacher, I'm a healer, I'm an inspirer, and I'm a connector. And if I'm doing one of those four things, I'm happy. If I'm doing all four, watch out, right? Like I'm a little bit of a chaos crazy, right? But like just the energy that that brings. So when you think about that for yourself, where do you think, like you talked about that pivotal moment of receiving your degree from Gonzaga and getting it in the mail and then feeling this emptiness, was that the light switch for you? Because I said at the beginning, like, and maybe you just exude this, but I know you do some things to help ground yourself, right? Like
Mhm.
you're a very spiritual man. And so like what were some key life moments that happened for you that made you step back and go, oh, right? Like, I think I want to move in a different trajectory.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. And, I think like for a lot of us, especially growing up in the United States, like, like the idea of like, how successful am I? And like, am I
Yeah.
successful enough? Like, that's like the question that is instilled in many of us at a young age. And it was for me for a long time. And at some point, like you talk about the lights, the switch flipping, I felt like I started asking myself a different question, which was like, what's giving me meaning? What's
Mm.
meaningful for me?
What
And
is meaningful for Sergio?
yeah, and right now I could tell you, it's family. It's my son. It's spending time with him and helping him grow, and being present to my wife and building, our tribe.
Yeah.
And so that's like the main thing. Service to humanity, and like it's important for me to be involved in the work of making the world a more just and peaceful place, because I wouldn't be here and have the opportunities that I have if somebody hadn't have done that, if somebody hadn't been thinking of others beyond just, their family, the people in their country, the people in their, tribe or their group. It's like,
Yeah.
it's people of goodwill who are looking out at the world and saying like, how can we share the wealth? How can we
Yeah.
create prosperity for everybody? Who created opportunities for our family to be able to rise above some of the circumstances that they were experiencing, in the country where my family grew up in. So being of service to humanity, that's very meaningful for me. And teaching, I really find like that, I think I have a gift, I should say, for connecting with others, for helping people in their journey of learning and discovery. And so whether that's as a university professor, or whether that's developing leaders in my organization, or coaching or mentoring young professionals in their careers, like there's something that really, like, I really come alive when I'm in a role of coaching and journeying with others and helping them
Yeah.
find out what's meaningful for them. And so those are a couple of the things that are giving me meaning right now.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Sergio, because as you say that, I was thinking about that really ties back to that person that tapped on your shoulder and said,
Mm.
hey, I want to, like, you should go to this leadership thing, right?
Yeah.
And I see you as the person helping tap on people's shoulders, showing them the possibilities that they have as a
Mm.
leader to make an impact in the world. Like, as you were talking, that image just came to me. So when you think about it, like, I know this is
Mhm.
fairly new, your nonprofit leadership group that you and a couple of colleagues put together. Describe for us a little bit about, well, not your like elevator pitch, but like describe for us what that organization, I mean, I get it. You're creating leaders in a nonprofit organization. We talked a little bit about it before. I've been involved in a lot of nonprofits and there is a need, right? But when you think about going down that route, what are you and your two colleagues' vision for this organization?
Yeah. Well, it all comes down again to like, the idea of helping leaders become better leaders for a better
Yeah.
world. And we realize that civil society, nonprofit organizations have a huge role in helping to address many of the crises that we're
Yeah.
facing right now as a human society, whether it's the ecological crisis, whether it's poverty, discrimination. I mean, there's so many needs that are being met by nonprofits, and at the same time, nonprofits don't have the resources that for-profit companies do have. And just like there's, economic disparity between people where, you have a very few amount of people that have a lot of the wealth, it's the same in nonprofit organizations. There's like a very few number of nonprofits that have tremendous resources. And then the overwhelming majority of nonprofits don't have those resources to be able to deliver for their mission. And so I think a big part of what we're trying to do is especially cater to the smaller to medium-sized nonprofits who wouldn't have the resources to hire staff to do, to develop their human resources, to do, some of the exciting visioning and dreaming and capacity building that larger organizations are able to do. So really seeing ourselves as kind of consultants and partners in helping smaller and mid-sized nonprofits be able to receive the benefits of the type of education and tools and resources that we've been able to, to get to know through our work at studying at Gonzaga. This is some really rich, innovative stuff that can help leaders and their organizations deliver more effective change at scale for all of humanity. And to me, it's not fair that mid to smaller nonprofits can't access that because some consultants are just way out of their price range. And so we offer our rates, our services at rates that are more conducive to being able to serve mid to small size nonprofits.
Yeah, nice. That's fantastic, Sergio. So let me ask you this. If someone wanted to, what's the name of the business? We talked about it before we started to record, but I know there's quite a few people in my followers that actually do a lot of nonprofit work. So you might be getting some phone calls, but what's the name of the company and what's the website?
Yeah. We're the Center for Nonprofit Leaders, and you can find us at centerfornonprofitleaders.org. And we just are getting ready to do a hard launch of our website. We've been working on it for a couple months, and our tagline is better leaders, better world.
Oh, that's so fantastic, Sergio. I'm so excited for you. I can't wait to see what happens there. So I want to ask you kind of an off the wall question. Yeah. Tell me 5 books that you would recommend to people that are delving into leadership, that are leaders. What are 5 pivotal books for you that helped you the most in your leadership journey?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't prep you for this one.
Yeah. So right off the top of my head, I'm just going to tell you the ones that helped me make some mental shifts. Yeah. I think Peter Senge's The Fifth Discipline. I think that one, if you're a leader, you got to read that. It's all about systems thinking, becoming a learning organization. The difference, in terms of technical skills and adaptive skills, and how do you become the type of leader that can really change, and that's really what distinguishes a leader from a manager. And managers kind of maintaining the status quo. Leaders are adapting to an evolving world as it comes even faster and faster at us. And the skill that Peter talks about is, being a learning organization. How quickly can you learn and adapt? And it goes back to, it reminds me of the old CATS model too, that a manager needs that technical information, but as you grow as a leader, that technical side gets smaller and smaller, right? And the adaptive, the ability to change, the ability to do those things and create vision. So, okay, that's the first one. Yeah. And in no particular order, just the ones that are coming to mind. I get in trouble sometimes when I mention him, but Paulo Freire, the Brazilian educational philosopher, he wrote a book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And I've had students who absolutely hate it, think that it's dangerous and not a good thing. What I took from Paulo Freire was the importance of trusting the people at the bottom, trusting the people on the peripheries, realizing when our leadership is really generative and respectful of dialogue and respectful of human autonomy, creativity, and when it's more of just command and control and oppressing even people's inner voice and alienating aspects of personhood that are not considered mainstream or center to those who usually are in charge. And so Paulo Freire, a little bit controversial, but has a lot of, I think, really interesting things to say and ways to challenge people who have a lot of power in organizations.
And it's a small book, but dense. Holy smokes.
Yeah.
I remember reading that one. Okay.
Paulo Freire, because my emphasis was in servant leadership, Greenleaf's, the servant as leader, that's a great one. And it's even though it wasn't an academic book, like he's not a researcher, he wasn't studying, leadership. There were so many great things in there that when you boil down, like, what is leadership and the qualities and the characteristics of leadership that come out of that, and the work that Larry Spears has done around leadership. And for him, he says, for Larry Spears, he says that for Greenleaf, it was really about listening. And so, like, usually we describe leaders as those that are super charismatic, that are great orators, and that do usually all the talking. And unfortunately, when we do that, a lot of people end up not seeing themselves as leaders. And I think what Greenleaf did was, he was kind of a man of his time in a lot of ways, and he helped give a language to a style of leadership that wasn't as centered and mainstream, and envisioning it as something more collaborative, more about service, more about listening. That can be a challenge even for some people. I know, like, when we talk about this, some people, the idea of a person in charge being of service can be an interesting conversation, but I find like it really resonates with the style of leadership that is important to me, that I have found to be effective, and especially because of its importance on listening.
Yeah, and even as you talk about that, I think about how it's really a disposition, right? It's a way of life. And I remember growing up in my first corporation, it was very much a servant-led organization, but I didn't have the words to coin it. It was interesting because it was in the telecommunication industry, actually, that then was purchased by AT&T, which is who Greenleaf worked for. But that small company, Sprint Publishing and Advertising, that group really taught me the lessons of that. So then when I was introduced to it in my master's, I was like, oh my gosh, finally, right? Like, it was something. And so that book is a great one too. Okay.
Yeah.
One or two more.
And going on the theme of listening, because that ended up becoming like a really light bulb moment for me, because I was the type of leader before going to Gonzaga that was very much about the talking, a leader is the person that like inspires the vision and that like gets everybody on board and that like motivates everybody. And again, not to say that that's not things that leaders can do, but that's usually, I think, what most people think of when they think of leadership. And when I started hearing this idea of like listening, and I often tell people I'm coaching, like, if you want to be listened to as a leader, that means you got to be able to listen to others. And if you want to be the type of person who can influence, you have to be influenced by others as well. And so it's a two-way street. And the book that kind of started helping me make that shift of, seeing the importance of speaking, to making the shift of the importance of listening was Susan Cain's, the power of, I think, the power of introverts in a world that can never stop talking.
Oh, I haven't read that one. I might have to look into that one.
Oh, that was phenomenal. As a person who's not an introvert, to read, kind of get a window into the head of an introvert, and to hear the value that they bring to their teams, their communities, their organizations, I definitely stepped back with a much deeper respect for people who are introverted. And it just created this little shift in my head that allowed me, I think, to be a better leader, a better servant to my colleagues and people I'm coaching or developing, who that's the way that they process information in the world, is by bringing it inside. And so great book, recommend checking it out, especially if you're a introvert that you don't feel like a leader. This is a great book for you. If you are a leader who usually surrounds themselves with other people who are always talking, this is a great book to kind of help you see what you're missing out on by not maybe bringing in some folks who are a little bit more introverted into your inner circles and teams.
That's great, Sergio. And last book, give me one more and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, well, I'll put this as kind of like a school of thought more than any particular book, but the work of Marshall Gantz.
Okay.
Some folks know him. He's a lecturer, a senior lecturer at the Harvard Kennedy School. He's a social movement leader. Was studying at Harvard back in like the 60s or 70s when he was a student, decided he didn't want to just study history. He wanted to go make history. Ended up going down to Mississippi, got involved with the civil rights movement down there. That became like an amazing experience that just helped him find his calling. Eventually, he was from Bakersfield, California, not too far from where I am. Came back over here to work with Cesar Chavez, helped him start to build the United Farm Workers Union. And then went on to do amazing things run several campaigns with different politicians, was instrumental in Obama's 2008 election campaign and helping to organize young people through that. And he has a lot of articles and work that he's done around what they call a public narrative and like the stories that leaders tell, and storytelling as a core leadership practice that helps people understand who you are as a leader and what you're about as an organization, and the urgency of now, of why the work of this person, this movement, this community is important to us now. And he calls these three stories: the story of self, the story of us, and the story of now, as a public narrative, the art of communicating values, transforming values into resources to be able to bring about the change that leaders want to see in the world. And so you can look up things by him, but a lot of people in the school of community organizing, in many different schools of thought of community organizing, I found that they are embodiments of the type of leadership I think that you and I learned about when we were at Gonzaga, and encourage folks to maybe pick up or look into community organizing.
Thank you so much for sharing all of those. I love it to get pick your brain too on some books that I haven't read. So thank you for that. And Sergio, thank you so much for being on. And I know we mentioned the website earlier. We'll put that in the show notes. But if someone wanted to follow you, is it LinkedIn, social media? Where would be the best place for them to follow you?
Yeah, LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. I think it's Sergio I. Lopez. I know we could probably send that in the show notes.
Yep.
That's probably the easiest way. And then our website for our nonprofit consulting firm is Center for Nonprofit Leaders. .org. And happy to connect with anybody who's interested in just connecting one-on-one and talking about some of the work that we're doing, or any way that we can help.
Great. Sergio, thank you so much for being here. I so appreciate it. And thank you to all of the listeners for being here again. And if you would like to gain some clarity in your life and understand kind of what might be stopping you from moving forward, please go out to my website. It's in the show notes. Sign up for a clarity call. It's not a pressure call. It's more of let's take a look at and get really crystal clear. And I promise you, after 30 minutes, you'll be clearer than you were when we started the conversation. And with that, it's a wrap, folks, and we will see you next week. Thanks again, Sergio.
Thanks, Debbie.
Thanks so much for listening. The song Ride is co-written and sung by Miss Jackie Wilson and her collaborators Tyler Banks, David DJ Lee, and Chris Renee. And a huge shout out to them for allowing us to use this perfect song. Everyone have a fabulous week, and I'll talk to you next week.